let's get to the political parties now. The Congress of the People's National Spokesperson Dennis Bloem joins us now more for reaction. And I want to continue with the conversation on the independent public procurement entity, Mr. Bloem. So it's been said it's difficult to monitor all procuring departments to ensure that supply chain management policies are actually being complied with and that their policies are in fact consistent with the PFMA and the Constitution. How can government improve on this, not only ensure synergy, but create some distance with those who may want to interfere and cover their backsides, as it were?
So good evening. We are very much disappointed with the speech by the President. The reason why we are saying this is again empty promises from the President. The President must just be bold and implement the recommendations from the Zondo Commission. Procurement, so let me come to your question. So procurement, there is no way, if we still have people who only agenda is to steal money, that thing, we must do away with tenders. I'm happy that the President is saying that ministers, but that is a recommendation from the Zondo Commission, that ministers must not get involved in the procurement process. That's the only way, because they themselves are doing this damage. But
ask this question, Mr. Bloem. In the past, it's been lamented the high turnover of director generals, whom it was, to my understandings, are supposed to actually be the last port of call in terms of being the accounting officers for the department, that the minister is more of a political head. So wasn't that foreseen by creating the position of director general?
No, you see, the interference by ministers, the political head, that's why the turnover is so huge, because they are interfering into the work of the DG. They want to take the work out of the hands of the DG. Political head is not the DG. Is the overall caretaker of the department. But now these people are so greedy and so corrupt, some of these ministers, that they interfere. That's why if a DG is saying, no, we can't do this and that, then there's hiring, then there's tension between the minister and the DG. That is the biggest problem that the country is facing.
I want to hear your thoughts on this, because you mentioned that the President should just go ahead and implement the recommendations of the State Capture Commission. I think 350 is the figure that he mentioned here. But he also went on to clarify that he can he can implement the recommendations, or some of them, or some he actually has the discretion not to. What are your thoughts on that?
That is the problem. You see, we spent more than R1 billion on this Zondo Commission report. Now, the President is saying he can use his discretion to implement to implement the recommendations or not. It is totally unacceptable to us, because when the Zondo Commission were busy doing their work, it is thorough the investigation, thorough research, and it is not for the President to come and say that he can decide. And crime is crime. Corruption is corruption. State capture is state capture. We want to see each and every recommendation be implemented. He must not have the discretion, the president, to say that. But we know he is also doing this because some of his comrades are implicated in this whole thing. But we will keep an eye, so I can promise you that we will keep an eye on the implementation of this recommendation. We want to see them, all of them, being implemented.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us, COPE's national spokesperson, Dennis Bloem. Let's get reaction now from the president of the African Transformation Movement, Vuyolwethu Zungulais. Mr. Zungulais, a very good evening to you. The president spoke about some of the remedies being an anti-corruption entity. He also spoke about lifestyle audits for the president, the deputy president, ministers and deputy ministers. Are you satisfied with this? Is this something that you foresee happening in the near future? Because part of this action plan that he was handing over to Parliament, I'd imagine, was to give people assurances that there are timelines for the implementations of some of these things, these recommendations.
Evening, Tshepiso. Look, firstly and most importantly, there are some elements of the report that are very clear, that do not require the president to consult or have commissions of inquiries or further panels, etc. For example, the issue of the ministers or deputy ministers serving in his cabinet that have been found doing wrong things in the eyes of the State Capture Commission. He said he's still applying his mind, whereas the State Capture Commission is very clear on the conduct and how the continued presence of those ministers in the cabinet and by the president not acting by removing those ministers clearly shows that there is not genuine when it comes to taking into account any of the recommendations by the commission. Because for him to submit a report to Parliament on the other entities that are not under his direct control, he should have given, if people would see the president actually acting on the one element that is under his direct control, which is the appointment and firing of ministers, people would have confidence that indeed we are going somewhere. So we are not moved as the ATM. We think it's not genuine. It's just buying time. And also let us remember, there's a court of law that used these words to define Mr. Ramaphosa. They said he acted in a manner of bias of disqualifying kind, acted in bad faith. Therefore, any action that comes from Mr. Ramaphosa, we must treat it with suspicion because a court of law found him to act in bad faith.
Now, just in terms of, and it's very an intriguing thing to talk about a lifestyle audit of the president, given the president's current troubles, the allegations that he faces at this point. And I'm just wondering, will this set the tone, the mold for how it is done, given that this action plan will come from the presidency? He hands it over, and I understand there are other state actors that will be involved in helping to make some of these determinations. But as I was saying to COPE's Dennis Bloem at the moment, the president said within reason, he has a right not to implement some of these recommendations.
Yeah, indeed. Those recommendations are not binding. However, there is no way in which you could spend so much money. And in all of these years, the current president has been encouraging that commission of inquiry. And later on, it just becomes a piece of paper. He should have given the confidence that indeed those recommendations are somewhat very important in his administration. And for the people to take him seriously, he would have acted against his own organization that commission found that it has been benefiting from state contracts, and he would have acted on the ministers that have been found in the wrongdoing. On the issue of the lifestyle audit, we'll always welcome lifestyle audits, but it must not be something that is not accurate. For example, in Parliament, there is a code of ethical conduct for members of Parliament and the executive, and you find that that code of conduct has got loopholes which allows people to actually get away scot-free from them. So anything that is under that political clout and political machinations of the current executive, we're going to find it difficult to trust because we know it is not done in the best interest of the people.
So I want to continue along that vein of Parliament and its powers. The President said the Treasury will engage Parliament on its funding to ensure that it is better capacitated to hold the executive and, of course, government to account. What would be in the right ballpark in terms of the amounts or the areas with which Parliament itself could be better capacitated? Obviously, the issue of legislative changes, regulatory changes, these were, recommendations made by the State Capture Commission. So I'm just trying to see how you can marry the two. The funding, how will it translate to the kinds of changes that you think need to be made for better effect to hold the executive to account, because you say the Parliamentary Code of Ethics has loopholes?
On the issue of parliamentary accountability, the President sets the tone. So if you've got a sitting head of state that is legislatively obligated to answer questions in Parliament as a means of accountability, he goes to Parliament and he refuses to answer. That sets the environment and the culture of lack of accountability on the side of the President. That is one thing. The other thing, when it comes to the funding, Parliament, firstly, is heavily underfunded, and it is required that it must play an oversight role over the executive, an executive that defines or decides on the budget allocated to Parliament. Currently, there are committees in Parliament which only survive on one or two, in fact, only one researcher, one content advisor, and that is not enough given the amount of work that is required. Therefore, even without speaking about the actual figures, but the issue of the research component of Parliament, particularly to support individual members of Parliament and their respective committees, that will go a long way in terms of capacitating Parliament to play an oversight role. However, what is critical is the attitude and the culture and the tone that is set by government. If you've got an executive that undermines Parliament, head of state that undermines Parliament, then all of these avenues will count for nothing because there will be no political will.
Thank you so much for your time. African Transformation Movement President Vuyolwethu Zungulais wrapping up the reactions to President Cyril Ramaphosa's address to the nation earlier on, addressing the Parliament, or rather the recommendations of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, what his action plan will be, what he submitted to Parliament yesterday. He spoke a little on some of what is contained in that. Let's take a quick break. We're back in just a moment. When we return, we look at peace efforts for Ethiopia.